Well, the UK government is planning to expand its military training role in Iraq and Turkey. According to the Ministry of Defence, nearly 800 British forces are already deployed in the region. They are training Iraqi soldiers in how to deal with roadside bombs. Meanwhile, British soldiers are taking part in US-led efforts in Turkey to train insurgent groups fighting in Syria. Official sources say no final decision has yet been made, but the army would continue to keep its contribution to the region under regular review. Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined by Max Igan, who is a radio host and political commentator, who's joining us live now via Skype from Andalusia. Sir, thanks very much for joining us here on PressTV. How do you feel about this expanded role of the British training, if I may call that, of Ministry of Defence in Iraq and Turkey?
Well, it's just more continued hypocrisy from the West. Look, what we've seen, we've just seen recently Tony Blair being charged with war crimes for his part in the Iraq War, which is a completely illegal war. And now we see them going in and expanding it even further. And not only that, expanding conflicts in other countries. When they say they're going in to train insurgents for Syria, what they're doing is training ISIS, al-Nusra Front, and al-Qaeda. These are the insurgents in Syria. And then they have the hypocrisy and the audacity to say that they're training the army in Iraq on how to deal with the insurgents that they're training for Syria. I mean, it's an absolute joke. This is an entirely Western-run operation. The whole thing needs to be shut down. And what we're seeing here really ultimately is a massive abuse of office by all Western governments, especially the British government. I really wonder what it's going to take for the British people to stand up and hold this government accountable for their actions for escalating and continuing to escalate these conflicts.
Right. I wanted to hone in on Iraq for a moment, Mr. Igan. You know, the Iraqi government has long complained that Western promises of training and even arms shipments have long been delayed and have been insufficient for quite a while. How does that play into this entire thing? Because that certainly changes the reading here, doesn't it?
Well, it changes the reading a little bit, but you're never going to get Iraq getting the type of help it wants from the West, because the West is never going to arm Iraq to the extent that it needs to deal with these insurgents, because it's just using Iraq as a tool. It's using it as a playground. It's not going to arm Iraq with any major weapons or tanks or military or air support, because there's a chance that the Iraqi army may use this against the ever-expanding Israel project, and this is not what they want. It's not about bringing stability in the nation. It's about dividing it, splitting it up into sectarian factions so it can be easily eliminated later down the track.
And finally, then obviously back to Turkey and the training there of anti-Syria insurgents. How dangerous is that? Obviously for backlash on Turkey itself, obviously, and then obviously on the UK itself as a whole as well.
Well, they're setting Turkey up for this, of course. We're seeing them often complaining about ISIS troops going over and receiving medical support and all sorts of stuff in Turkey. And now we see the British going in there and training these very same people. And people have to get it into their heads. This is who they're training. The so-called Syrian insurgents are these terrorist groups that are rampaging all across the rest of the Middle East. And they're using this as a method of funding weapons and money into these insurgents groups under the guise of fighting terrorism. They're really supplying the same groups that they claim to be fighting against. And people need to wake up and smell this. This is a massive abuse of office of all of these governments, and we need to take the matter in hand.
Very well. We'll leave it there at that. But we do, of course, appreciate you taking your time out to speak to us today. That was Mr. Max Igan, who was speaking to us live from Andalusia.